blood is thicker than water, but nobody told the faculty of Manhattan's most elite academy that you don't cross a billionaire's adopted daughter. They called her a charity case. They made her cry. Tonight they find out her reclusive, terrifyingly powerful father isn't just rich. He's hungry. Manhattan's St. Jude's Preparatory Academy was a fortress of new money and old secrets, a school that easily rivaled Phillips Exeter and the Dalton School in both crippling tuition and sheer unadulterated elitism. It was the kind of place where 16-year-olds casually drove custom Porsches and parents bought entire library wings just to ensure their children's Ivy League admissions. In this glittering snake pit of wealth, pedigree was everything. Lily Covington had none of it. 16 years old with quiet brown eyes and a gentle disposition, Lily was a lamb surrounded by wolves. Everyone at St. Jude's knew her backstory, or at least the heavily sanitized rumor of it. 10 years ago, the reclusive billionaire Alistair Covington, CEO of a global logistics empire, had adopted her from a dilapidated orphanage in Eastern Europe. For a while, the PTA mothers had swooned over the romantic philanthropy of it all. But as the years dragged on and Alistair never once made an appearance at a charity gala, a parent-teacher conference, or a spring auction, the whispers began to sour. They decided Alistair Covington was ashamed of her. They decided she was an illegitimate mistake, a burden he paid to keep out of sight. The faculty, deeply reliant on the bribes and donations of the local elite, took their cues from the parents. If the reigning socialites of the Upper East Side despised Lily, then the teachers would ensure her life was a living hell. Headmistress Victoria Gable was the ringleader, a woman whose face was pulled terrifyingly taut by expensive surgeons. Gable ruled St. Jude's with an iron fist and a heart made of dry ice. She hated Lily because Covington Enterprises paid the tuition via sterile automated wire transfers, never once offering a personal bonus or a gala sponsorship. Then there was Richard Harrison, the AP history teacher. Harrison was a bitter, deeply arrogant man who loved nothing more than breaking the spirits of students who didn't have influential fathers to protect them. Miss Covington Harrison sneered on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, slamming a graded essay onto Lily's desk. The red ink across the top screamed a failing grade. Another abysmal attempt. It seems all the private tutoring money in the world cannot buy actual intellect. Perhaps you should ask your father for a brain transplant. Oh wait, he doesn't answer your calls, does he? The classroom erupted in cruel snickers. Lily swallowed hard, her face, burning, her eyes glued to her desk. She didn't cry. She had learned long ago not to give them the satisfaction. Mr. Harrison, that is completely uncalled for. The voice came from the doorway. Clara Jenkins, the newly hired AP literature teacher, stood there with her arms crossed. At 28, Clara was a breath of fresh air in the suffocating halls of St. Jude's. She didn't wear Prada. She wore sensible cardigans. She actually cared about teaching, and most dangerously of all, she had a fiercely protective streak when it came to Lily Covington. Harrison rolled his eyes, adjusting his designer tie. Miss Jenkins, I'm simply preparing the girl for the real world, a world where she can't coast on a billionaire's pity. Clara stepped fully into the room, her amber eyes flashing with defiance. You're humiliating a student to inflate your own ego. Lily's essay on the French Revolution was brilliant. I proofread it myself. If you gave her a failing grade, it's out of spite, not academic standard. The room went dead silent. Nobody spoke to Harrison like that. My office. Both of you. A cold, sharp voice echoed from the hallway. Headmistress Gable had been walking past, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floors. 10 minutes later, the doors to the headmistress's opulent office slammed shut. Lily sat trembling in a leather chair, while Clara stood firmly beside her, a protective hand resting on the teenager's shoulder. This insolence ends today, Gable hissed, glaring at Clara. You have been a thorn in my side since September, Clara. This academy runs on a delicate social hierarchy. We cater to the elite. We do not coddle charity cases. She is a student, Clara fired back, her heart pounding. You're bullying a child because her father doesn't come to your cocktail parties. Gable's eyes narrowed into venomous slits. Watch your tone. In fact, let's make this a teaching moment. Mr. Harrison found the master answer key to the upcoming midterms missing from his desk this morning. Gable turned her predatory gaze to Lily. And a quick search of Miss Covington's locker revealed it buried beneath her gym clothes. Lily's head snapped up, tears finally spilling over her lashes. No, I didn't. I didn't take anything. Liar, Harrison barked, leaning against the mahogany bookshelf. I knew you were struggling, but theft, that's grounds for immediate expulsion. You planted it, Clara shouted, stepping in front of Lily. You're failing her on purpose, and now you're framing her because you need a scapegoat for the cheating scandal with the mayor's son. Gable slammed her hands on her desk. Enough, Clara. You are suspended without pay, pending a review of your insubordination. And you, Miss Covington, are suspended indefinitely. Tonight is the annual PTA gala. Your father will be notified that if he does not appear in person to discuss your expulsion, your belongings will be mailed to whatever estate he hides in. He's traveling, Lily choked out, panicking. Her father wasn't just a CEO. He was the vampire king of the eastern seaboard, a man who slept during the daylight hours and handled the brutal politics of the supernatural underworld by night. He couldn't just casually stroll into a PTA meeting. Please just let me take a zero. Don't call him. Oh, we aren't calling him. Gable smiled maliciously. We are throwing you in the library until the gala begins tonight. You will sit on the stage, and we will make an example of you to the board. Take her away, Richard. As Harrison grabbed Lily's arm, pulling her roughly from the chair, Clara tried to intervene, but Gable stepped in her way. Pack your desk, Miss Jenkins. You're done here. Lily was shoved into the dusty, unused archives of the St. Jude's Library. The heavy oak doors were locked from the outside. Alone in the dim light, shivering from the damp chill, Lily finally broke. She pulled her cell phone from her blazer pocket, her fingers trembling as she dialed the only number she knew by heart. Deep beneath the financial district of Manhattan, in a soundproof subterranean boardroom, lined with black marble, Alistair Covington sat at the head of a massive obsidian table. Alistair did not look like a man in his late 40s, though his forged birth certificate claimed he was. He possessed the terrifying, timeless beauty of an apex predator. His jawline looked carved from granite, his eyes were a piercing, luminescent shade of silver, and his tailored charcoal suit draped flawlessly over a frame built for lethal violence. He had ruled the vampire covens of North America for 5 centuries. He commanded armies of the undead, controlled billions in human currency, and had toppled empires. Currently, he was listening to a coven leader from Chicago complain about territorial borders. Alistair was exceptionally bored. Suddenly, a soft buzzing vibrated from the breast pocket of his suit. The entire boardroom of ancient vampires froze. Nobody, absolutely nobody, interrupted the king during a summit. Alistair slowly withdrew the phone. Only one person had this private number. His silver eyes narrowed as he looked at the screen. He held up a single pale finger, silencing the Chicago vampire mid-sentence. Alistair pressed the phone to his ear. Lily, my little bird, are you all right? You're supposed to be in your final period. On the other end of the line, a muffled, heart-breaking sob echoed. Papa! In a fraction of a second, the temperature in the subterranean boardroom plummeted drastically. Frost literally began to crystallize on the rims of the crystal water glasses on the table. The ancient vampires shifted nervously, their primal instincts screaming at them to flee. The king's aura had shifted from bored aristocrat to absolute monstrous wrath. Who? Alistair said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. Made you cry? Lily poured the entire story out. The bullying, the failing grades, the framed answer key. Headmistress Gable, Mr. Harrison, and Clara Jenkins, the only teacher who had tried to save her, who had just lost her job for doing so. They locked me in the library. Lily wept. They said I have to sit on the stage tonight at the PTA gala so they can humiliate me in front of the board. They said you're a coward who doesn't care about me. Alistair closed his eyes. The sheer blinding rage that possessed him was entirely foreign. For 500 years his heart had barely beat cold and dead in his chest. But when he had found that tiny, abandoned human baby in a snowstorm 10 years ago, something inside him had shifted. Lily was his tether to humanity. She was his entire world. "Listen to me carefully, my sweet girl," Alistair said, his voice instantly softening, though the frost on the table continued to spread. "Dry your tears. Do not let them see you break. I will be there. But Papa, the sun has set, Lily, and I am very, very hungry." Alistair hung up the phone. He stood towering over the coven leaders. "The summit is concluded. If anyone speaks to me before tomorrow evening, I will separate their head from their spine." In a blur of unnatural speed, the Vampire King vanished from the room. By 8 p.m., the St. Jude's Grand Auditorium was a spectacle of excessive wealth. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over round tables draped in silk. Waiters circulated with silver trays of champagne and caviar. The parents, adorned in thousands of dollars of haute couture, mingled and laughed, wholly unaware of the storm that was brewing. At the front of the room on the grand stage, Headmistress Gable stood at a mahogany podium. Behind her, seated on a solitary wooden stool, was Lily. The teenager looked pale and exhausted, staring down at her lap as the entire room of wealthy elites whispered and pointed. Clara Jenkins stood at the very back of the auditorium near the exit doors. She had refused to leave the building. She couldn't abandon Lily, even if it meant security dragging her out. Her heart ached for the girl. She gripped her purse tightly, wishing she had the power to stop this circus. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed members of the board," Gable spoke into the microphone, her voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings. "St. Jude's is a bastion of excellence. We demand perfection, integrity, and honor. Unfortunately, not every student belongs in our hallowed halls. Some are simply charity cases utterly lacking in moral fiber." Harrison stood near the front row, smirking openly, sipping his champagne. "Tonight we address the expulsion of Lily Covington." Gable continued, gesturing backward with a dismissive wave. "A girl who resorted to theft because she lacked the intellect to succeed. A girl whose own father couldn't be bothered to show up to defend her." The words had barely left her mouth when the temperature in the auditorium abruptly plummeted by 20 degrees. Women in backless evening gowns gasped, shivering uncontrollably. The crystal chandeliers flickered wildly, the bulbs buzzing like angry hornets. The waiters froze, a sudden primal dread washing over the entire room. It was the biological response of prey sensing an apex predator. Clara shivered her breath, creating a small cloud in the suddenly freezing air. She turned her head. Boom! The heavy 12-foot-tall mahogany double doors at the back of the auditorium were blown open with such violent force that their hinges snapped. The doors crashed into the drywall, splintering the expensive wood. The entire gala screamed in shock, spinning around. Standing in the doorway, framed by the shadows of the hallway, was Alistair Covington. He didn't walk. He glided. Every step he took toward the stage was completely silent, defying the heavy leather of his Oxford shoes. He wore a bespoke, midnight black suit that seemed to absorb the light around him. His silver eyes swept over the terrified crowd, and wherever his gaze landed, billionaires and socialites instinctively flinched, stepping back to clear a path. He exuded a terrifying, suffocating power. It rolled off him in waves. As Alistair reached the back rows, his eyes suddenly snagged on something. Or rather, someone. Clara Jenkins? Alistair paused. For the first time in 5 centuries, his deadened senses flared to life. He could hear the frantic, rhythmic thudding of Clara's heart. He could smell the intoxicating sweet scent of her blood-vanilla old books, and something entirely unique. But more than that, he sensed her fierce, protective aura. He knew instinctively that this was the woman who had stood between his daughter and the wolves. Their eyes locked. Clara couldn't breathe. The man looking at her was impossibly beautiful, but his eyes held a danger so profound it made her knees weak. Yet beneath the danger, there was a flash of profound, startling gratitude directed solely at her. Alistair offered Clara a millimetre of a nod. Then his gaze snapped forward to the stage. The gratitude vanished, replaced by murderous intent. "I am Alistair Covington," his voice rang out. He wasn't using a microphone, yet his deep, resonant voice perfectly filled the massive hall, vibrating in the marrow of everyone's bones. "And I understand there seems to be a misunderstanding regarding my daughter." Silence absolute and suffocating seized the grand auditorium. Nobody dared to breathe. The city's wealthiest power brokers, CEOs, hedge fund managers, and politicians found themselves entirely paralyzed by the sheer overwhelming presence of Alistair Covington. He did not need to brandish a weapon or raise his voice. His power was an invisible, crushing weight in the room, triggering a primal instinct buried deep within the human brain. Do not run. It will chase you. Alistair ascended the few carpeted stairs to the stage. His silver eyes were locked onto the small, trembling figure on the stool. Headmistress Victoria Gable, her perfectly powdered face, draining of all colour, stepped forward, attempting to salvage her fractured authority. "Mr. Covington, you cannot simply burst into a private gala." Alistair did not even glance in her direction. He kept walking until he stood directly in front of his daughter. Lily looked up, her brown eyes pooling with fresh tears, but these were no longer tears of fear or humiliation. "Papa," she whispered, her voice cracking. The terrifying, monstrous aura radiating from Alistair instantly evaporated, replaced by a tenderness so profound it made the onlookers' chests ache. He knelt, ruining the crease of his bespoke trousers, and carefully cupped her tear-stained face in his pale, cold hands. "I am here, little bird," he murmured softly. He shrugged off his midnight black suit jacket and draped it over her trembling shoulders. The jacket dwarfed her, but it was a shield. "You have been incredibly brave. Now let your father handle the rest." Alistair stood, slowly pivoting to face Headmistress Gable. As he turned the temperature in, the room dropped again, frosting the edges of the microphone stand. "You requested my presence, Victoria," Alistair said smoothly, his voice a dark velvet purr. "I must apologize for my tardiness. I was busy finalizing a real estate transaction." Gable swallowed hard, taking an involuntary step back. A real estate transaction. Mr. Covington, this is about your daughter's academic dishonesty. We have zero tolerance for theft." "Oh, I am well aware of what you tolerate," Alistair interrupted, taking a single deliberate step toward her. "You tolerate cruelty. You tolerate the systematic breaking of a child's spirit to appease the fragile egos of your donors." And speaking of donors, Alistair's piercing gaze swept the front row, landing directly on Mayor Davies, who suddenly looked as though he wanted the marble floor to swallow him whole. Alistair snapped his fingers. From the shattered doorway at the back of the auditorium, a sharply dressed man with equally pale skin and a leather briefcase walked silently down the center aisle. He moved with the same unnatural grace as Alistair, completely ignoring the horrified stares of the elite crowd. He approached the stage, handed the briefcase to his king, and bowed deeply before retreating to the shadows. Alistair popped the brass latches of the briefcase. He pulled out a thick stack of glossy financial documents and a small USB drive. "Let us discuss theft," Alistair announced, holding up the papers. "Richard Harrison," Harrison, standing rigid near the stage, flinched as his name was called. The arrogant smirk had vanished, replaced by a sheen of cold sweat on his forehead. I found the answer key in her locker. That is a fact. Did you? Alistair stepped to the edge of the stage, towering over the AP history teacher. Because my associates, who are exceedingly thorough, spent the last 30 minutes acquiring the security footage from the hallway outside the girls' locker room. Fascinating how the cameras experienced a brief glitch during your planning period, Richard. But more fascinating is the offshore bank account routing number I found buried in your emails. Alistair tossed a few sheets of paper down at Harrison's feet. 3 deposits of $25,000. Alistair declared, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Wired directly from a shell company registered to our esteemed Mayor Davies. A very generous gift simply to ensure his son, whose intellect rivals that of a damp sponge, maintained a perfect GPA. The auditorium erupted into shocked gasps. Mayor Davies jumped up from his seat, his face purple. This is slander. I demand you leave this premises at once. Covington. You have no authority here, Alistair smiled. It was not a warm expression. It was the smile of a wolf baring its fangs. Actually, Mayor, I do, Alistair replied softly, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing a sleek black folder. As I mentioned, I was delayed by a real estate transaction. St. Jude's has been quietly struggling with a massive deficit, relying heavily on lines of credit to maintain this illusion of grandeur. 30 minutes ago, my holding company bought every single cent of that debt. I also purchased the land beneath this building. He dropped the black folder onto the podium. I own St. Jude's Preparatory Academy. Alistair stated, his voice ringing with absolute finality. Every brick, every desk, and every contract. Which means, Victoria, I am officially your employer. Gable's mouth opened and closed like a suffocating fish. You can't. I just did. Alistair stepped right into her personal space. His silver eyes flared with an unnatural, terrifying luminescence that made Gable whimper. You dared to humiliate my daughter. You allowed a corrupt, pathetic man to frame her to cover up his own sins. You thought because I do not attend your tedious little galas, I did not care. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper that only Gable and Lily could hear. I have slaughtered entire armies for looking at her the wrong way. You are merely a pest I am choosing not to squash. Alistair straightened up, projecting his voice to the stunned crowd. Victoria Gable, you are terminated effective immediately. Your pension is void. You have exactly 5 minutes to vacate my property before my security escorts you out in handcuffs for accessory to extortion. Gable let out a choked sob, turning and fleeing off the stage, her high heels echoing frantically as she ran down the side aisle toward the exit. Alistair looked down at Harrison, who was practically trembling in terror. As for you, Richard, the evidence of your bribery and framing of a minor has already been sent to the Manhattan District Attorney. I suggest you find a very good lawyer. Leave my sight. Harrison didn't hesitate. He scrambled backward, nearly tripping over a chair before sprinting out of the auditorium. Chaos rippled through the seated parents, but a single sharp look from Alistair silenced them instantly. St. Jude's will undergo a restructuring, Alistair addressed the terrified elite. This institution will no longer cater to your fragile egos or accept your bribes. Excellence will be earned, not purchased. Anyone who has an issue with this new management is welcome to withdraw their children tomorrow. Good evening. Alistair turned his back on the wealthiest people in New York, dismissing them completely. He walked back to Lily, extending a hand to her. She took it, sliding off the stool. A massive, radiant smile broke across her face. For the first time in years, she held her head high in this building. Let us go home, my little bird, Alistair said, leading her down the stairs. As they reached the center aisle, the crowd parted for them like the Red Sea. But Alistair did not head straight for the shattered double doors. Instead, he stopped halfway down the aisle, his eyes locking onto a figure standing near the back wall, Clara Jenkins. Clara froze as the terrifying, impossibly handsome billionaire approached her. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had just witnessed a man dismantle the city's corrupt elite in 5 minutes without breaking a sweat. Alistair stopped a few feet from her. Up close, his beauty was devastating. He possessed a raw magnetic pull that left Clara feeling light-headed. "Clara Jenkins," Alistair said softly. "Yes," she managed to squeak out, clutching her purse. Lily tugged on Alistair's arm. "Papa Miss Jenkins was the only one who defended me." She stood up to Mr. Harrison and the headmistress. "She lost her job because of me." Alistair's expression softened as he looked at Clara. The cold, predatory edge in his silver eyes melted into profound respect. "I am aware of what you did," Alistair said, his voice dropping to a register that sent a shiver straight down Clara's spine. "In a den of vipers, you were the only one with a spine. You protected what is mine. For that you have my eternal gratitude." Clara swallowed, trying to find her professional voice. "Lily is an exceptional student, Mr. Covington. She didn't deserve any of this. I just did what any teacher should do. Perhaps," Alistair mused, stepping half an inch closer, the scent of him like fresh snow cedar, and an underlying crackle of ozone washed over her. "But it is rare to find such fierce integrity. As I just mentioned, St. Jude's is in need of new leadership. The position of headmistress is vacant." Clara's amber eyes went wide. "Headmistress Mr. Covington? I'm 28. I don't have the administrative background for—" "You have the moral background," Alistair interrupted gently. "And you have my backing. My resources are infinite. You will run this academy exactly as you see fit. You will set the curriculum, hire the staff, and I will ensure nobody ever questions your authority." He held out a sleek black business card with a single silver crest on it. "Call my office tomorrow," Alistair said, his gaze locked onto hers with an intensity that made Clara's breath hitch. "We have much to discuss. Not just about the school, but about Lily's future. I believe she could use a permanent mentor. And I believe I need to be far more involved." Clara slowly reached out her fingers, brushing against his, as she took the card. His skin was unnaturally cool, but the contact sent a jolt of electricity racing up her arm. She looked up into his ancient silver eyes, recognizing that beneath the terrifying billionaire exterior was a father who would literally burn the world down for his child. "I'll call you," Clara promised, a small smile playing on her lips. Alistair offered her a genuine, breathtaking smile in return. It was the first time he had smiled at a human other than Lily in over a century. "I look forward to it, Miss Jenkins." With a final nod, Alistair placed a protective hand on Lily's shoulder and guided her out of the auditorium, leaving a stunned, silent room of elites in his wake. Clara stood there, holding the black card against her chest, a profound sense of destiny washing over her. Life at St. Jude's was never going to be the same. And as she watched the Vampire King and his human daughter disappear into the Manhattan night, Clara had a feeling her own life was just about to begin. The terrifying display of power wasn't just a victory for a bullied teenager. It was the dawn of a completely new empire. St. Jude's Preparatory Academy, transformed overnight from a corrupt playground for the rich into a genuine sanctuary of learning under Clara's fierce leadership. As for Alistair, the immortal king finally stepped out of the shadows, realizing that protecting his daughter meant standing by her side in the light. And in Clara Jenkins, he found not only a brilliant headmistress, but a woman whose fierce protective heart managed to awaken a spark in his own cold chest, proving that even a centuries-old monster can be saved by love.